Iran sanctions on crude oil markets and trade in general. We are joined by Mr. Fereidun Fesharaki. He's chairman at Facts Global Energy. In a bit, Mark To, managing director of asset management and head of research at Fung Financial Group, will also join us. But let me start it with Mr. Fesharaki. Mr. Fesharaki, good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us from Singapore. Your initial reactions to this on trade, on crude, a lot of talk about how while Iran will lobby with some of the other European and other nations to stay a part of this nuclear program, I think Donald Trump made it amply clear that any nation that supports Iran would also face the wave of sanctions from the US. How difficult would it be for Iran to manage the other nations who are a part of this deal?
It will be impossible. The US sanctions are very clear. They are the laws of the US Congress. They would come into effect for within 180 days. So we have a period from today until November 5, 2018, where every country which is importing oil from Iran will be monitored by the US government. And then the 180 days after that, they would have to cut between 20 to 30% of their imports. We don't know what the final number for the US for Iran exports will be. Last time around it was 1 million barrels per day. I suspect they would like to reduce the current exports, which are about 2.7 million barrels per day of crude and condensates, to 1 million. So this would be more severe than the last time. And that would be effective only after November 5. So in the next 6 months, business as usual, but 6 months after would be very dramatic fall in the Iranian oil exports and the dramatic impact on the oil markets.
By dramatic, would you be able to, I know nobody can quantify it, but what's your best guess of how dramatic could this dramatic be?
No, it's not difficult to quantify because we know what the Iranian oil exports are. We know what the US last time imposed on the total exports from Iran. It used to be 1 million barrels per day maximum exports. This time it will be either that or even less. So we would be going from 2.6, 2.7 million barrels per day of crude and condensate to 1 million barrels per day. So it would be removing from the oil market somewhere between 1.5 to 1.6 million barrels per day of supplies. That is very dramatic. Even the Saudis, if they want to increase production to their maximum capability in the short term, they will not have enough oil on their own to replace this. So it must be a combination of them, Kuwaitis, UAE, Russia. Everybody has to sign in to be able to balance that. So that would push the prices up significantly.
That's interesting. Let's get in Mark To in on this as well. Mark, since we are on the topic of crude already, let's talk about that first, and then we'll talk about some of the other trade impact as well. What's your sense? The first thought that will come to mind naturally is that this will have an impact on the crude markets. Are you in a position to be able to say how much would the crude markets react near term, medium term?
Okay, thanks for having me. I tend to think that what Donald Trump said is no surprise to me at all, because you can see that he has been a source of uncertainty since his administration is in place. And actually, I think the geopolitical tensions will not be easing anytime soon. You can see that different kinds of things are happening all because of Donald Trump. And right now, for oil prices, I have been bullish for the past few quarters, and I think the worst time has been over, because you can see that while there has been some kind of a correction of the supply-demand imbalance, for traders, for investors, for the market participants, we all tend to think that the long-term structural problems cannot be solved anytime soon. So at this very moment, we can see that for the past few days, past few sessions, oil price has been moving up, and we can see that it has been testing the resistance at 70 for NYMEX. I think the overall implication is that we all can count on the market to price in something because of their expectations, and everybody is expecting that Donald Trump is going to say something like that. So we can see that some kind of profit taking has been in place immediately after the announcement. But of course, for the medium term, as you said, we can see that the impact will still be felt. So I'm going to be even more bullish, because you can see that while we can calculate the output, as said, we are also counting on the expectations of the other people, other participants. So at this moment, I'm going to be even more bullish. I think for crude oil prices, I think well over 70, maybe 75 for the coming end of month is really possible and feasible.
Okay. 75 for the coming end of month is certainly possible. So certainly upsides for crude, we don't know how much. Mr. Fesharaki, just one quick thought here. I mean, Iran economy was reeling under pressure 2 years into this deal as well. For them to be able to salvage their economy, the one thing that they don't need, and no-brainer of course, are these sanctions. So will they do all they can in order to convince the world that they are not out on a path to enrich their uranium reserves or the uranium program, and then try and hope for some better trade terms with all the countries? Or do you think that path is a no-go now?
Well, we need to understand that it is not possible for the Europeans or the Russians or the Chinese to go against the U.S. sanctions. It's not possible. So it's not possible that Iran carve a separate deal. Everybody would be subject to the same deal. The Iranian economy has suffered very much. So although the sanctions have been lifted, still transfer of money to Iran is a problem. Nobody's investing in the country. So for the Iranians, the benefit of these sanctions has been higher oil prices, higher oil exports, higher oil revenues, which unfortunately have not always been channeled into the Iranian economy. They've been channeled to a lot of international ventures, military ventures. So, but the economy is in a free fall. The Iranian currency has fallen 50% in the past 2-3 weeks. And before that, another 30%. So this kind of event means that the Iranian economy would be in a much worse shape. And people in Iran, many of them would blame the government, not the Americans, on this. So the issue of what happens to the Iranian political system is what the Trump administration is after. They're after a regime change. They're not after a new deal. So this kind of economic pressure is exactly what they're looking for to create discontent and change of the government in Iran.
Just show that function on the Bloomberg terminal, which shows the kind of trade relations that, for example, India has with some of the other trade partners. And it shows that some minor impact, if at all, on trade between India and Iran. I think China probably has a larger trade term with Iran. But that would be my last question on this, Mr. Fesharaki. Crude is one thing. Aside of crude, do you expect any major ramifications for trade? Because, I mean, at least from an Indian perspective, aside of crude oil, we don't see too much of a trade import from Iran coming in terms of export. Maybe there are rice exports and a couple of other commodities, but nothing too dramatic that will disrupt economies per se.
I think implications for India are quite serious, because some of the companies in India, such as Essar, are heavily dependent on the Iranian crude. And for them to reorganize their system with a lower volume of imports would be a big challenge. The US government will impose a quota on India, and it is up to the minister to divide who gets how much. And so if it is divided across the board, then you would have some companies suffer in India. The ONGC Farzad B field investment in Iran, which is now back again on track, it's a very big deal for India. It's a huge discovery for India, which to develop it now would be a violation of the US sanctions. In terms of export of Indian goods to Iran, which previously replaced some of the Iranian the dollar currency that India owed Iran, that also will become a problem. So it is going to be quite significant for India, as much as it is for other countries, but specifically for ONGC and Essar, it would have big significance.